Mark had never been the jealous type. He didn't check his wife's phone, didn't eavesdrop on her conversations, didn't make scenes. His marriage to Kelly seemed stable. They had been together for 10 years, owned a cozy house in the suburbs, shared mutual friends, and had a well-established routine. But lately, something had changed. Kelly started staying late at work. She suddenly signed up for a gym membership, even though she had never shown any interest in fitness before. A few new dresses had appeared in her wardrobe, more revealing and expensive than the ones she usually wore. And most importantly, she had become overly protective of her phone. Her iPhone used to sit openly on the kitchen counter, unlocked, accessible to everyone. Now, it was either always in her hands or tucked away in her purse. Whenever a message came in, she would quickly turn the screen face down or close the notification instantly. At first, Mark brushed off his suspicions. "I'm just overthinking," he told himself. But one evening, during dinner, when her phone lit up with an incoming message, and she, without even looking at it, hurriedly turned off the screen, something clicked in his mind. "Who texted you?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Kelly froze for a split second, then shrugged nonchalantly. "Probably work. I'll check later." And that's when Mark realized she was lying. He watched as she placed the phone back into her purse, quickly shifting the conversation to another topic. There was a barely noticeable tension in her eyes, the kind that betrays someone hiding something. That night, Mark lay awake for hours. He replayed the past few months in his mind, her sudden busyness, frequent business trips, a new perfume scent that wasn't any of the ones he had ever bought for her. A chill ran through him, even under the warm blanket. "If she's lying to me, I'll find out the truth." Mark didn't know exactly what he was going to do. But one thing was certain, from this moment on, he would watch her every move. And if his suspicions were confirmed, she had no idea what he was capable of. The next morning, Mark did everything to act normal. He made Kelly coffee, kissed her goodbye before work, and even smiled when she mentioned having an important meeting that evening. "Don't wait up for me," she said, adjusting her hair in the mirror. "A meeting that lasts all night?" Mark raised an eyebrow, feigning mild surprise. "Well, after work, we're going out for drinks, just to unwind." "Sounds great," he nodded. If he hadn't already known she was lying, he might have believed her casual tone. But now, he saw every false detail. How she averted her gaze, how quickly she tucked her phone into her bag, how her voice was a little too even, as if she were carefully choosing her words. Kelly left, and Mark remained in the kitchen, gripping his coffee cup so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "She's lying. I know she's lying." But he had no proof. Yet. That day, he worked from home but couldn't focus. His mind was consumed with thoughts about Kelly. Eventually, he opened his laptop and pulled up a news site, just to distract himself. Headlines flashed before his eyes. "Football star divorces amidst scandal, police discover body in local waterway, Ridgewood Grand Hotel celebrates its anniversary." Mark was about to close the page when his brain latched onto the last headline. Ridgewood Grand Hotel? The name felt familiar. He clicked on the article. It was about a famous hotel downtown celebrating its anniversary. The photos showed a stylish building, a golden logo, luxurious interiors. And suddenly, his heart clenched. Last month, Kelly had told him she was on a business trip. She said her company had rented a conference hall at a different location. But the article explicitly stated, no business meetings had taken place at the Ridgewood Grand on those dates. She was there? But not for work. Mark combed through his memory. That night she had come home late, smelling like an unfamiliar cologne, saying she was exhausted. He opened their shared bank account and checked the statements. Transaction, Ridgewood Grand Hotel. She hadn't just lied. She had been there. His fingers clenched the mouse so tightly he felt the tendons strain. This isn't just a fling. This is something planned. And now, he had a lead. Mark sat in front of his laptop, staring at the bank statement. Ridgewood Grand Hotel. The transaction was dated the same day Kelly had claimed she was on a business trip. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Until now, everything had been mere suspicion, but now he had something concrete. She hadn't just lied, she had deliberately hidden where she had really been. And now what? His fingers drummed slowly on the desk. If she was lying this openly, if she was so bold in deceiving him, that meant she was sure of her impunity. It meant she thought he would never suspect a thing. But she was wrong. He decided to start small. After lunch, while Kelly was still at work, Mark walked through the house, searching for any clues. He had never paid much attention to her belongings before, but now, every little detail mattered. In her nightstand, he found a new bottle of perfume. Chanel. A new fragrance. He was certain he hadn't bought it for her. 2 new dresses hung in the closet, expensive, with the tag still on. On her vanity, a pricey lipstick had appeared, a shade he had never seen on her lips before. These things didn't just show up out of nowhere. He exhaled and opened her laptop. A password. Unexpected. Kelly had never locked her computer before, she had nothing to hide. Now, things had changed. Mark tried several options: her birthday, their wedding date, their cats' names. Nothing. All right. There are other ways. He returned to his own laptop and opened their shared iCloud account. Kelly wasn't very tech-savvy, so maybe her data was still accessible. He entered her email. Then the password. Access granted? Mark froze for a moment, inhaling sharply through clenched teeth. All right, show me what you're hiding. He opened her photo gallery. He scrolled quickly until he reached the pictures taken on the dates of her business trip. The first photo, a glass of wine on a restaurant table. The second, a mirror selfie in a luxurious hotel room. The third, a man's hand on her waist. Something inside Mark cracked. His breathing grew heavy, his fingers curled into a fist. She hadn't just lied. She had been with someone. He studied the reflection in the mirror, searching for details, anything that would reveal who he was. Only part of a face. Unfamiliar. But that didn't matter. Mark had already made up his mind. He would find out everything. And then, he would make her pay. Mark sat motionless, staring at his laptop screen. In the photos, Kelly looked happy, too happy. Her smile was one he hadn't seen at home in a long time. This wasn't just dinner with coworkers. This was a date. He scrolled further. A selfie in the hotel mirror. A plush robe, a glass of red wine in her hand. A hand on her knee. A man's hand. Strong, confident, wearing a Rolex. And the last one. A dark window reflecting an image, him, standing behind her. She was right next to him, and even through the reflection, it was obvious. This was more than just a fling. Mark felt his breathing deepen, his chest tightening with barely contained rage. He clenched his jaw. All right. You want to play this game? Let's play. That night, he did nothing rash. No scenes, no accusations. In fact, when Kelly walked through the door, calm, smiling, a little relaxed from her meeting with coworkers, Mark acted as if nothing had changed. How was it? He asked casually, glancing at her purse. Kelly unbuttoned her coat and nodded. Good. We had a great time. She placed her bag on the chair and headed to the bathroom. Mark waited until he heard the water running. Then, carefully, he opened her purse. Inside were her phone, her makeup bag, her keys, and a receipt. Ridgewood Grand Hotel. 2 glasses of wine. Room 503. His heart froze for a second, then started pounding even harder. You didn't even bother throwing the receipt away? Mark slowly clenched the paper in his fist, his gaze shifting toward the bathroom. The water was still running. He grabbed her phone. Locked with Face ID? Of course. She wasn't stupid. But Mark knew a little trick. He took her phone and quietly walked to the bathroom door. When she stepped out, still drying her hair with a towel, he angled the phone just enough for Face ID to unlock. And then, iMessage opened instantly. Kelly didn't even notice. She walked past him into the bedroom, while Mark quickly scanned her messages. Most of them were normal, friends, work chats. But one contact stood out. "Did you miss me already?" The latest message. Sent 20 minutes ago. From L. Mark tightened his grip on the phone. "L, who are you, L?" He opened the chat. L had sent messages about missing her. About not being able to wait until their next meeting. About how Kelly was enchanting, as always. And then Kelly's responses. "You're so dangerous. I don't know how much longer I can keep this a secret." Mark's fingers tightened around the phone so hard that he almost cracked it. He could wake her up right now. He could shove the proof in her face, demand answers, unleash everything he was holding inside. But no. He was going to do this right. He was going to gather more evidence. He was going to show her that she had no idea who she was playing with. And when she least expected it, he would destroy her. Mark barely slept that night. He lay in the darkness, listening to Kelly's steady breathing beside him. She slept peacefully, carelessly, as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. His wife was cheating on him. L. Mark turned the name over in his mind, trying to connect it to someone from her life. Work? A friend? But it didn't matter. Whoever this man was, he had already made the biggest mistake of his life. Now wasn't the time for confrontation. He would wait. He had discovered that Kelly wasn't just lying, she was acting like she was untouchable. She wasn't even covering her tracks, as if she was confident he would never suspect a thing. That made him even angrier. But anger was dangerous if left uncontrolled. He would keep himself together. He would be patient. And when she least expected it, he would strike in a way that she would never recover from. The next morning, Mark acted as if nothing was wrong. "How'd you sleep?" he asked, making coffee. "Great." Kelly stretched, adjusting her robe. "And you?" Mark smiled, swallowing the bitter truth along with his coffee. "As always." Her phone was on the table. "Locked, of course." Kelly picked it up, glanced at her messages, and quickly set it back down. "What, afraid I'll see something? Anything interesting?" he asked casually. "What?" She looked startled for a split second before smiling. "No, just work stuff." "Work?" "Of course." Mark took another sip of his coffee. He wasn't listening to her words anymore. He was listening to her pauses. Watching her gestures. Analyzing how quickly she changed the subject. She thought she was in control. She thought she could lie to him without consequences. She was wrong. That day, Mark decided to be cautious. He installed a tracking app on her phone. It wasn't hard. iCloud allowed tracking of all devices linked to their family account. When she told him she was going out for coffee with the girls after work, he simply smiled and nodded. Then he waited 20 minutes, opened his phone, and checked her location. She wasn't at a coffee shop. She was at a hotel. Again. A chill ran down Mark's spine. Good. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was evidence. And now, he knew exactly how to use it against her. Mark sat in his car in the parking lot across from the Ridgewood Grand Hotel. His fingers gripped the steering wheel, his gaze locked on the entrance. Kelly had told him she was getting coffee with friends. But her phone told a different story. She was here. So it's not just a one-time mistake. This is a pattern. A lifestyle. He watched as a familiar figure in a beige coat stepped out of an Uber and walked swiftly through the hotel's glass doors. No hesitation. No looking back. He could have followed her inside right then. Made a scene in the lobby. Watched her face as she realized she was caught. But that wasn't enough. She needed to suffer. She needed to be afraid. 5 minutes later, Mark entered the hotel. Calm. Composed. "Good evening, sir. How can I help you?" The receptionist greeted him. Mark smiled, pulled out his wallet, and slid his credit card toward her. "My wife just checked in after work. I wanted to surprise her, but I forgot which room she booked. Could you help me out? The receptionist hesitated. I'm sorry, but we can't disclose guest information. Mark sighed, shaking his head as if embarrassed. I understand. It's just, we're celebrating our anniversary, and I wanted to do something special. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. Or I could just wait here until she comes down. I'm sure she'd be very surprised to see me waiting by the elevator. The receptionist swallowed nervously, glancing away. Room 503, sir. Mark nodded. You've been very helpful. He took the elevator up to the right floor. His steps were light, almost silent. His heart beat steadily, no rush of adrenaline, no shaking hands. I'm just a guest at this hotel. Just a husband visiting his wife. Room 503. Mark stopped in front of the door. From inside, he heard muffled laughter. A woman's. A man's. She didn't even lock the door chain. Mark listened. You know, I thought this would be harder. Kelly's voice, cheerful, carefree, like she was at a party. What do you mean? A man's voice. Deep. Confident. Hiding this from Mark. Can you believe he has no idea? He's so trusting. Trusting. Mark smiled. He didn't go inside. Not yet. Instead, he pulled out his phone and snapped a few photos through the small gap in the door. The red wine on the table. Kelly in a robe, sitting on the bed. Her L. A fit man in an expensive suit, standing close to her. The perfect picture for the ending of our story. Mark turned and walked back toward the elevator. He wouldn't ruin her night. He'd let her enjoy it. And then, when she came home and looked him in the eyes, he would make her regret ever calling him trusting. Mark got home long before Kelly. He knew she wouldn't return until late, probably after midnight, just like last time. She always did when she was with him. With Elle. She thought everything was perfectly planned. But now, there was a new player in the game. At home, Mark immediately transferred all the photos he had taken onto his laptop. Yes, he murmured, staring at the images. Now this is real proof. He didn't even feel pain anymore. He had already gone through the shock, had already survived the blind rage. Now there was only one thing left, cold calculation. He accessed their shared iCloud and stored all the photos in a hidden folder. Then he started digging. Kelly had no idea how much data her phone actually stored. Texts, deleted messages, call history. And there it was. Call logs. L. Logan Kane. L. Had a name. Mark quickly pulled up social media and searched for it. Several profiles appeared, but one caught his eye immediately. Logan Kane, 42 years old. CEO of K Corporation, married. 2 kids. Mark smirked coldly. You have something to lose too, Logan? Kelly came home at 1 a.m. Mark heard her keys fumbling in the door, the way she slipped inside quietly, trying not to make noise. He was sitting in the living room, scrolling through his phone. He looked calm, relaxed. Oh, you're still up? Kelly hesitated for a moment. Couldn't sleep. Mark lifted his head, smiling warmly. How was your night? Great. She took off her coat and quickly stuffed her phone into her pocket. We sat for a while, gossiped. I didn't even notice how time flew. That's good. Mark took a sip from his cup. I think you deserved a nice break. She pressed her lips together briefly, as if analyzing whether there was anything in his tone. But then, she simply nodded. Yeah, it was fun. Mark smiled. By the way, I decided to go for a walk today too. Went downtown. He watched her reaction carefully. Oh, really? She adjusted her hair, but her voice remained even. You haven't gone out in a while. Yeah. Mark set his cup down. Even stopped by the Ridgewood Grand Hotel. That was it. For a split second, her body tensed. Barely noticeable, but he saw it. What? She laughed, though her fingers trembled slightly. Why? Mark shrugged. Just curious. Nice hotel. He stood up and walked closer. Honestly, I even took the elevator up. I think some very interesting people stay on the 5th floor. Kelly held her breath for a second. But then, she quickly feigned indifference. Mark, you're talking so weird. Maybe you're just tired? Mark leaned in slightly. You know, I think you're right. I am tired. Very. He ran his finger along her cheek, just like he used to when they were happy. But don't worry. Everything will change soon. And in her eyes he saw something new. Not fear. But the realization of danger. She knew. She suspected. And this was only the beginning. The next morning, Mark woke up before Kelly. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while she slept peacefully beside him. Her breathing was steady, calm, like nothing was wrong. She had no idea her whole life was about to shatter into pieces. Just a little longer, darling. Just a little longer. Mark got up, made himself coffee, and sat down with his laptop. The plan was already set in motion. He found Logan Kane on social media. The perfect family photo. A beautiful home, a happy wife, 2 kids. Logan looked like the embodiment of a successful man who had it all. But now, he was about to have something more. Mark created a new anonymous account and got to work. He uploaded all the photos from the hotel and attached a short message. What does a model husband do when his family has no idea? Then, he found Logan's wife's profile and sent her a private message with the pictures. He didn't add anything extra. Just the images, they spoke for themselves. After that, he compiled all the evidence and created an anonymous post on one of the most popular news forums, where people exposed scandals, corruption, and, of course, infidelity. Headline: The double life of businessman Logan Kane. While his wife stays home with their kids, he spends his nights at a hotel with another man's wife. Mark reread everything once more and clicked publish. He closed the laptop and took another sip of coffee. The clock reads 7:45 a.m. In just a few hours, this news would start spreading across the internet. And in the meantime, he would just wait for the world to burn. Kelly walked out of the bedroom in her white robe, stretching and running a hand through her hair. Good morning, she smiled. Good morning, Mark smiled back, sipping his coffee. She had no idea. But in just a few hours, her life would change forever. Mark waited for the first impact. At noon, his phone vibrated. It was Lauren Kane, Logan's wife. She didn't say much, just a short message. Who are you? Is this true? Mark didn't reply. He just smiled, knowing that the chain reaction had already begun. Minutes later, he checked the news and saw the first headlines. Prominent businessman Logan Kane exposed in cheating scandal. The photos he had uploaded were already spreading across the internet. The next call came from Kelly. Mark saw her name flashing on the screen, but he didn't pick up. He was waiting for the perfect moment. Only after half an hour, when her calls became frantic, he finally answered one. FaceTime. The video loaded. Kelly was at her office, but she looked nothing like her usual self. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes darted around in panic. What did you do? She practically screamed. Mark took a slow sip of his coffee, angling the phone so she could see his calm expression. Hey, Kelly. Rough day? Did you put this online? Her voice cracked with desperation. Put what online? He furrowed his brows in mock confusion. Oh, you mean the articles about Logan? Fear flickered across her face. Mark, listen to me. No. His voice turned cold. You listen. He switched the camera view and pulled up a photo on his laptop. Her silhouette at the hotel. A glass of wine. Logan beside her. Kelly gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Please, let's talk about this. It's not what you think. Mark raised an eyebrow, amused. Not what I think. All right. Then explain. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Go ahead, Kelly. I'm listening. She sucked in a shaky breath. It was a mistake. I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to? Mark laughed. You call it a mistake after months of lying? Kelly trembled. I can explain. I don't need explanations. His voice was sharp. I just wanted to see the look on your face when you realized it's over. Kelly sobbed. Mark, please. Saying goodbye? Good. Because this is the last time we're talking. He hit end call before she could respond. Then, he shut off his phone. With deep satisfaction, he poured himself another cup of coffee and sat back, watching everything collapse around her in real time. Mark ignored the calls. He put his phone on silent and calmly watched the chaos unfold online. Kelly was panicking. She sent dozens of messages. At first, she begged. Please talk to me. This is just a misunderstanding. You know I only love you. Then, she tried to justify herself. I was confused, Mark. I didn't mean for this to happen. It meant nothing. You're the only one that matters to me. And finally, anger. How could you? You ruined everything. You vindictive bastard. Mark smiled. Who really ruined everything here? His revenge worked faster than expected. News about Logan Kane spread like wildfire. Social media was buzzing. Wow, this businessman turned out to be a real piece of trash. His poor wife. How could he humiliate his family like this? Who's the woman in the photos? Have they found her yet? Then came the direct messages for Kelly. Her friends, coworkers, even family started reaching out. Kelly, is this true? Tell me this is some kind of mistake. Oh God, is that you in the photos? Imagining her face at that moment was pure satisfaction. That evening, Kelly stormed into the house. The door swung open so hard that Mark actually glanced up from his laptop. She looked destroyed. Her eyes were red from crying. Her makeup was smeared. Her hands trembled as she dropped her purse onto the floor. What have you done? She screamed. Mark calmly put his phone down. Me? He tilted his head. Nothing. I just showed people the truth. Kelly took a shaky step toward him. You humiliated me. You ruined everything. Me? He raised an eyebrow. And who's been ruining everything for months? It was a mistake, Mark. She clutched her head. I was just confused. Mark sighed. Kelly. You met him in a hotel. You lied to my face. And you call that a mistake? She fell silent, her lips quivering. You know what's funny? Mark's voice was almost amused. If I hadn't found out, you would have kept going. You don't regret cheating. You regret getting caught. Kelly covered her face with her hands and let out a broken sob. What now? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Now? Mark exhaled. Now you reap what you sow. Her life would never be the same. And this was only the beginning. Kelly sat on the edge of the couch, her posture radiating despair. Her shoulders shook, her face was streaked with tears, and her hands rested limply on her knees. Mark, we can fix this. Her voice broke into a hoarse whisper. He stood in front of her, calm, hands in his pockets. Fix it? He repeated, tilting his head. What exactly are we supposed to fix, Kelly? She ran her palms over her face, as if trying to erase everything that had happened. Please, let's just talk. You know I didn't mean for this to happen. Mark laughed. You didn't mean for this to happen? He stepped closer, leaning down until their eyes met. This wasn't an accident, Kelly. It was a choice. Her lips trembled. It was a mistake. You keep saying that like it's going to make me believe you. Mark straightened up. But you know what? I don't care. Kelly's eyes widened. What? I don't care, he repeated evenly. I don't care about your excuses. I don't care why you did it. I just know that you're a cheater. And now, the whole world knows it too. Her hands clenched into fists. You destroyed me. No, Kelly. You destroyed yourself. Her world crumbled at an astonishing speed. Logan Kane disappeared. After the scandal, his company lost key investors, and he was forced to resign. His wife, Lauren, filed for divorce the same day she received the evidence. The story exploded across social media. Kelly couldn't even go to work. Her colleagues looked at her with disgust. "That's the woman who slept with a married man." Her friends started avoiding her. She received dozens of messages, but not the kind she wanted. "How could you? What's wrong with you? You didn't just ruin your marriage, you ruined someone else's too. Hope it was worth it." She lost everything. Her reputation. Her friends. Her job. And most importantly, Mark was no longer her husband. One evening, after days of hiding inside, Mark packed his bags. "Where are you going?" Her voice was small, broken. "You once called me trusting, remember?" He smiled. "That was your biggest mistake." He grabbed his suitcase, opened the door, and didn't look back. Kelly was left alone. Forever. Kelly hadn't left the house in days. She lay curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at her phone as notifications poured in relentlessly. "Everyone's talking about you. Have you seen the new articles? How are you ever going to show your face again? Imagine losing everything over your own stupidity." Kelly's fingers trembled as she gripped the phone. This was a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. She had lost her job. They put her on leave, without explanation, but everyone knew the truth. Her company didn't want to be associated with the scandal. She had lost her friends. Some ignored her messages. Others bluntly told her they wanted nothing to do with her. She had lost her family. Mark was gone. Logan too. He didn't even try to defend her. The moment the scandal blew up, he vanished. No calls. No messages. No attempts to fix things. Kelly was completely alone. One evening, she gathered enough strength to call Mark. "Please talk to me." Her voice was weak, shattered. "For what?" His tone was flat, emotionless. "I don't know what to do," Kelly choked out. "I have nothing left." Mark was silent for a moment. "That's not my problem. Mark, please. I was stupid. I lost you, and only now do I realize what hell that is." He exhaled. "This isn't hell, Kelly. These are just the consequences of your choices." She shut her eyes, trying to hold back tears. "Will you ever forgive me?" she whispered. Mark smirked. "No." And then, he hung up. He knew that was the final blow. Kelly hadn't just lost everything. She had lost him. And that was the one thing that truly terrified her. Kelly no longer tried to call Mark. He knew she sat broken in her empty house, her phone no longer buzzing with messages from friends, only a flood of hate pouring in from all directions. And most importantly, for the first time in her life, she was truly alone. Mark felt no sympathy. He had spent the last few months living in a lie, trusting someone who had betrayed him not just physically, but emotionally. Now, it was over. And for the first time in a long while, he felt truly free. The new Mark woke up early. He changed jobs, moved to a new city, and started fresh. He stopped replaying the past in his head. Stopped thinking about that night when he first realized his wife was a cheater. Stopped remembering the way she lied, how she carefully chose her words, how she pretended to be innocent. It didn't matter anymore. Kelly was in the past. And he was building the future. One evening, Mark sat at a bar, scrolling through the news. The articles about the scandal had already disappeared from the front pages. People forget other people's tragedies quickly. But he knew Kelly would never forget. And that was his real victory. He put down his phone, took a sip of whiskey, and smiled to himself. Life was just beginning. Mark thought he had closed this chapter of his life, but the world wasn't done with Kelly yet. One day, he saw her by chance at a shopping mall. She was no longer the confident woman who once cheated on him without a shred of guilt. She looked exhausted. Her eyes had lost their spark, her hair was pulled into a messy bun, and the makeup that once highlighted her confidence now seemed to only conceal deep pain and fatigue. Mark decided to step closer. Long time no see, Kelly. She flinched at the familiar voice. When she looked up and saw him, her expression shifted, like she had seen a ghost. Mark! She swallowed hard, her throat dry. How've you been? He asked casually, already knowing the answer. Kelly shrugged, but avoided his eyes. I'm okay. Okay? Mark raised an eyebrow mockingly. Funny. I heard things haven't been easy for you. Her lips pressed together, and her fingers nervously twisted the hem of her sweater. Do you think this is fun for me? She whispered. Do you think I'm not paying for what I did? Mark smirked. Well, if you're paying for it, then justice has been served. Pain flashed in her eyes. You destroyed me. No, Kelly. You destroyed yourself. Her fists clenched, like she wanted to say something, but she only shook her head. I regret it, Mark. I really do. Mark sighed and looked at her carefully. Once, he had wanted to hear those words. Once, he had wanted to see her broken. But now, he didn't care. All he felt was relief. This doesn't change anything, he said coldly. Kelly blinked, as if hoping for a different response. But Mark simply nodded and walked away. No regrets. No pain. Only freedom in his chest. Mark no longer thought about Kelly. Her story was over for him. He lived a new life, breathed freely, met new people. But sometimes, the world had a way of reminding him of the past. One evening, as he was heading home after dinner with friends, his phone vibrated. A message from Kelly. He paused for a moment. Please talk to me. Mark sighed, turning the phone over in his hand thoughtfully. What did she want? Another chance? A chance to justify herself? It was too late. He opened the chat, read her short message and then pressed delete. No response. No regrets. He lifted his head, took a deep breath, and kept walking home. Life moved forward. And the past? The past stayed exactly where it belonged. Mark stood on the balcony of his new apartment, inhaling the crisp night air. The world around him had changed. He had changed. There was no more pain, no more anger, no more thirst for revenge. Kelly was just a shadow in his past. She had tried to come back, she had texted, called, but he never answered. He didn't feel hatred, only indifference. And indifference was the worst punishment for her. Because for her, he no longer existed. Mark glanced at his phone. No more messages from her. He smiled. It was over. And now, he was free. A new life. New possibilities. A future where there was no more deception. The game was over. And he had won.